But you don't think there's across the mainstream media some sort of anti-Israel conspiracy, some conspiracy to make the war look worse than it is?
No. I don't. I mean, my experience of journalists generally is we're not smart enough or organized enough to conspire in the first place. Now, I'm not on the ground there.
Sure.
So I'm talking out of my hat a little bit. And in the media, we're having our own existential struggle, and the resources people can devote to those stories are not what they once were. So that's a problem too. I do think there are people that are doing their damnedest to tell the story. And I also know that they'll make mistakes. I think the test is whether they own up to those, when they do.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. Delighted to welcome a longtime journalism hand. He was previously the editorial page editor at the New York Times, editor-in-chief at The Atlantic. That's why I've called you old. Also a former White House correspondent and bureau chief in Jerusalem. Now he's the Lexington columnist for The Economist, where he has to spell maneuver Manoeuvre, like a limey freak. It's James Bennet. How you doing, man?
I'm good, Tim. Yeah, they got a different word for everything.
I had to triple check maneuver this morning when I was reading one of your recent columns. I was like, what is that atrocity?
Yeah, it's not just the spelling. It's like learning a whole new language.
Yeah, the way they shape their mouth, it's got to be related to the teeth somehow, that the pronunciation is different. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about. I want to do some media gossip stuff with you at the end, both candy for the people who care about that. But we have actual real news on several fronts. And so we have to start with Jeffrey Epstein, as is our obligation until we figure out who killed him. The Democrats on the House Oversight Committee published portions of the birthday tributes that the Wall Street Journal had written about, the 50th birthday for Epstein. We get to see the Trump, whatever you want to call it, poem scene of a very nubile-looking young woman that he drew for Epstein, where he talked about how they have so much in common, and he's wishing for him a lot of wonderful secrets. We found another page in the book has a photo of Epstein holding an oversized check, supposedly representing Epstein selling a depreciated woman to Trump. We don't know if Trump was involved in that, but we know that check was there. What do you make of all this, James Bennet?
I mean, Tim, the White House has gone from saying the letter was non-existent to now saying it's simply a fake,
a forgery,
a forgery, and
really playing the long game. Whoever that forger was, really playing the long game. It's been a couple decades later,
Yeah, but doesn't it feel like this is just headed down now a pretty clear kind of partisan path? The Republicans in Congress, we're already seeing them fall in line and accept the claim that it is a fake. There's presumably a reality here that may or may not be provable in the end. I mean, it's a good fact for the Wall Street Journal that this is out. It would seem to strengthen their hand substantially in the libel case or defamation case. I can't remember which it is that Donald Trump's brought against them. But in terms of the politics of this, I don't know. But I feel like I have a bit of a blind spot when it comes to the Epstein story, because it has already had much more legs than I thought it would at first. I don't know. Where are you on that?
Well, I think it has had more legs because of the way that they've behaved. Really, this kind of was reignited when Pam Bondi gave those binders to the MAGA influencer world types. And, it was all this old information, and she was trying to check this box that there was this demand from the MAGA right to demonstrate that there was, a cover up of a pedophile ring of elite Democrats and liberals and people they hate. And so they put that binder out, which was obviously insufficient at the time, even to the biggest Trump fluffers. And so at that point, I was like, I don't know. This could be an issue for them. I didn't know how big of one. It became a big issue when it became more of a traditional cover-up. I mean, when you talk about this moving in a traditional partisan way, that's true, but it's also more of a traditional type of scandal in a weird way than Trump has dealt with in the past. It's pretty similar to a lot of other presidential cover-ups. There's embarrassing information about Trump or Trump's friends in there. We don't know exactly what. but it's embarrassing enough that they don't want to put it out. And so now they've decided to try to block people from seeing it, right? I mean, it's a pretty straightforward story in that sense.
What it's felt like, what has been unusual to me about this so far is that there was like bipartisan demand, and the Democratic backbenchers got this subpoena, and they actually have gotten and they got Republican support for that, and they actually got the documents released. And there seemed to be some genuine bipartisan desire to get to the bottom of this question of just how far this monstrous Epstein story really goes. And who all is implicated in it. And what seems to be happening now is people are the Republicans are beginning to solidify around the kind of partisan positioning here that the White House has sketched out, which is that this is fake, nothing to see here, let's move on.
There's the other way I think it might be a little different from that partisan fight, is that Trump has brought in a new part of the coalition that isn't quite as sycophantic as the old part of his coalition. When you talk about kind of the manosphere crowd, even some of the horseshoe type lefties, the RFK, Tulsi. I mean, Tulsi's gotten pretty sycophantic herself, but some of the people that sort of fit that mold, right? I think this makes him extremely mockable to them, to the extent that some of them care deeply about the story because they've been covering it and following it for years now. And then others of them maybe just more in a comedic, in a South Park Shane Gillis sense. It's kind of like really, this isn't you? I mean, it's his fucking signature. It looks exactly like his signature. It sounds like him, right? He's done drawings before. I mean, it's a preposterous thing, right? And it's you can get Charlie Kirk in the primetime Fox to go along with your most preposterous spin, but some of these guys had at least a little bit of dignity left, And so I think that makes him vulnerable on this in a way some of the other stuff wasn't.
Yeah. I think, was it your colleague Eggers wrote this morning, though, that in many ways this is the world that Donald Trump's been preparing us for many years, which is a world in which we don't know what the truth is, and you turn to your leader to tell you what's true and what's not true, and you don't rely on independent sources for verification. But you're right, there are these interesting, corners of MAGA world now, and in the MAGA media world, the world of influencers, where there are signs of people who are still thinking for themselves and it's trying to get to the bottom of this particular scandal, at least.
At least test driving the possibility. What will the audience think if I make fun of Donald Trump on this? See how it goes. That's encouraging, though. Test driving is good as we deal with his Orwellian desire to only believe him and not your lying eyes. This kind of leads us to your recent, what's the appropriate word for the Economist? You contributed to the cover story. You're a contributor. I don't want to go outside of Economist style. It's about America's missing opposition. In some sense, I just want to note that Democrats have a new chair of this oversight committee, Robert Garcia, who pushed for this. Who knows? Jerry Connolly, RIP, had initially been the oversight chair. Remember, there was this fight between AOC and him. I think obviously Democrats should have made AOC head of that committee. But it's noteworthy, right, that they're starting to do some of this stuff. I want to get into your article more broadly, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, on the Democrats' posture on Epstein in particular.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, they have been effective in getting this stuff released and actually working with Republicans to make that happen. So, I mean, we're seeing pockets of opposition, I think, in various ways that Democrats, in a very kind of decentralized way, obviously the governors too, in their own ways, finding ways to try to push back. But basically, I mean, it's been pretty ineffective up to date. I think.
Yeah. So this is how you begin your piece, which is, this is a puzzle. Most Americans disapprove of Mr. Trump, yet everywhere he seems to be getting his way. Why? And that's kind of the premise, right? Which is, so in some sense you could say, well, I talked to this Bill Kristol yesterday, his numbers are down. They're soft. We're not at Bush Katrina type numbers or anything, but it's not good. But at the same time, his authoritarian project is continuing apace. What was your answer to your own rhetorical question there?
Well, this is the piece you're talking about is editorial. What they call them leaders at the Economist. Again, they got a different word for everything here. And So it's kind of the collective wisdom of the whole hive mind. And the piece itself was written by our U.S. editor, John Prideaux, actually. And the argument is that it begins from the premise, as he said, that Donald Trump is not very popular right now. In fact, his net approval rating is about where Joe Biden's was after his dismal debate performance against Donald Trump last year. He's net negative about 14 points. And there's also a tradition in the U.S. of concern about, too much authority concentrated in one person. Yet, Donald Trump is overcoming both of those things right now, and it's partly a function of a lot of the institutions he's going after and challenging. Universities, law firms, media organizations aren't able to work collectively. There's kind of a first mover or collective action problem there, where they're all acting as independent agents. And in some ways, from a law firm's perspective, to the extent that a potential competitor is weakened, that's an advantage for them. So there's no collective action there. And on the Democratic front, I just don't think they've figured out who they are yet. And that's natural. We see this. This is the cycles of American history. It's typical for the opposition. It's not a parliamentary system. We don't have a shadow government in the U.S. And when a party gets a drubbing like the Democrats did in the last election, it takes a while. And really, it takes until they have a new presidential nominee, to be able to say, this is who they are and this is what they stand for. So it's normal that we'd be in that interregnum. But the fact is, I think part of the problem is Donald Trump's better at politics than they are. He's pretty good at politics, this guy. He's kind of hacked our system, and he's constantly on offense. And it's been, and going on MSNBC to shout back has not turned out to be a very effective strategy for the Democrats.
Yeah, I want to talk about the ways in which he's hacked our system, kind of the media element of it in a second. But let's just go to the elite institutions part of this first. I've been chewing over this tech titan meeting that Trump had last week for a couple of days now. And I was thinking about this counterfactual this morning, which is like, imagine what the reaction would be right now. There's a new poll out this morning showing Zoran up by like 20 points in the New York mayor's race. I think it seems pretty clear that he's going to be the next mayor of New York City. We'll see. Things happen in politics. But let's say that Zoran right now is gathering big leaders of finance together to come talk to him. And that what was requested was that they bring him gifts and suck up to him and talk about how great he is. And if they don't do that, then what Zoran is going to do is, I don't know, install some massive, wealth tax or some massive, carried interest tax or something. And that was the stick that he was holding over their head. And that counterfactual, Zoran's doing what Trump is doing. He's an offense. He's aggressive. He's hacking the system. I think that corporate America's hair would be on fire. People would be going insane. It would be in the front page story. People would be talking about socialism coming to America, threats. Donald Trump did exactly that with the Silicon Valley leaders to almost no pushback. How do you explain that asymmetry?
Tim, I struggle with this one. You can kind of play this game all day long. If Barack Obama had done X, if Joe Biden had done Y, if even George W. Bush had done Z, can't you imagine how everybody would be going berserk about that? And I don't know how to answer that question, because is it because Donald Trump is this uniquely kind of skilled political actor? He is an unusually charismatic guy. In my experience, always drives Democrats crazy when I say that, but he is. He has established this very unusual hold over his base. And he believes in these displays of dominance, which he does over and over again. So is he a unique character? Or is the uniqueness that he has just had more political imagination than the rest of these guys? And it turned out that all the structures, these institutional structures that are corporate leaders, all of these actors in American life were just weaker than we thought they were, and all it took was one guy willing to push harder to get him to cave. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand that we can play this game all day, but That's why I think the Zoran example is instructive, because it's more modern. It's happening right now, as opposed to like comparing to a past world. But like, I don't know. Like, I don't think everybody would fold for that, for some kind of left wing authoritarian. I don't think that corporate America would fold. I think they would fight it. And so I think there's another answer, and it can't just be Donald Trump's charm. Like, he obviously is charming, and Zoran's charming. So like, what is it? And is it that they kind of want it? Is it that he's more unapologetic? Is it more scared of him? The threat is more, they feel the threat more acutely? I don't know.
I don't know, Tim, what does it mean to be a left or right-wing authoritarian? Donald Trump has nationalized U.S. Steel, right? Like, is that a right-wing?
Well, no, but you know what I mean. It's more friendly to corporate America, more traditional values. You know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. I just don't know if Zoran Mandami were the president of the United States with the military at his beck and call, with asserting powers to levy taxes the way Donald Trump is doing with tariffs right now, would he be able to get temporary acquiescence from corporate America because the overlords of capital would be concerned that they might be next in line if they crossed him? I think it's possible that he would. I'm not sure he's that kind of guy.
Sure.
I'm not being argumentative. I take
let's be argumentative. It's a podcast. We can disagree and hash it through. I'm trying to understand. Literally, you talk about the missing opposition, but it's like, why? Again, the Democrats, we can talk about their strategy in a second. But for the non-political actors, non-directly political actors, like the degree to which they have acquiesced to him compared to the first time is like truly astounding. Trump's not any different. He's not more charismatic now than he was then. So what is it? Like, to me, it's like, well, they think the threat is real. Like, they really think that he might bring down a fascist hammer on their head. I guess. I don't know what other conclusion to come to.
Yeah, I mean, we all know this, right? He's got different people around him than he did in his first term, and he is much more confident in the exercise of his own power. And his people are much more imaginative about how they can apply it. You know, they spent a lot of time thinking about how they can do things like remake the bureaucracy and impose these tariffs and, take the other actions that we're seeing him take, stretch the definition of terrorist to encompass drug gangs, and then, assert based on a quarter century old, act, the ability to kill suspected drug dealers without any kind of trial. I mean, we know this, right? They've been thinking about this for a while. It's different.
That's true. That's true. The other side of that coin, though, is, I don't know. What did you make of Barack Obama doesn't talk a lot these days. It's maybe a month ago now. Time's kind of a flat circle in the Trump era, but he kind of lambasted like the elite institutions and the big corporate CEOs and the colleges. His point was kind of, I don't have it in front of me. It was essentially like, what are you so scared of? Like, you have huge endowment at Harvard. Like, he comes for you. Okay. Like, stay to your principles, weather the storm, like fight it, right? Push back. We've seen pushback work against him. I mean, I kind of wish Obama would be making those points a little bit different forum, but I thought that the point was compelling. No, it feels like Donald Trump hasn't demonstrated yet that he can cripple one of the 10 S&P 10 tech companies with his tariffs. Like they all have a pretty good P&L still out there. And so it's pretty interesting, like how much they've been unwilling to even do a modicum of like pushback.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, Harvard is fighting, right? They're still fighting in court. They haven't reached a settlement there. And it sounds like the Trump administration is still asking for things that they're not willing to acquiesce to. But your broader point, totally. Yeah, I agree with it. But you called me old earlier. It's sort of making all sorts of discoveries late in life. But like one of them is like, a lot of people aren't willing to stand up for their principles, it turns out. A lot of people who know better aren't willing to have the argument. And that's the problem. Like, even to have the argument, like, who's arguing with Donald Trump anymore? Who's telling him, no, we shouldn't do this. We should think differently about that. I don't care whether you believe in Donald Trump or whether you don't. Like, we all benefit from pushback.
Yeah, right.
And you're right about the elite institutions. And we've seen it in the law firms. We've seen it in the universities. We have seen it in the media. The biggest problem, of course, has been within the Republican Party, as you know better than I do. And and still is with these members of Congress who I think do have different points of view on a lot of this stuff, but they're just letting themselves get rolled over and over and over.
I was never, what was it? The Boy Scouts got to be prepared. I was never really a Boy Scout. I was more of a procrastinator, kind of a last second crash studier. I bet you guys could have predicted that about me. I don't know if I've ever said that before. I feel like that's my entire aura. But for some things, it's important to be prepared. And trust and will can help ensure that your loved ones are covered when it comes to things like medical decisions and powers of attorney. You can go to trustandwill.com/bulwark to get 20% off their simple, secure, and expert-backed estate planning services. Trust and Will's super easy. This kind of thing, it seems like it's a challenge, but you get onto the site. It is simple to navigate. You can get peace of mind at the end. Couldn't recommend it more highly. You never know what happens. You get in that airplane, you're thinking, I wish I would have gone to Trust and Will. That was something that I had thought about when I was flying to Europe the other week. So there you go. I recommend doing it. Each Trust and Will is state-specific, legally valid, and customized to your needs. So get on it. We can't control everything, but Trust and Will can help you take control of protecting your family's future. Go to trustandwill.com/bulwark for 20% off. That's 20% off at trustandwill.com/bulwark. Do it. Yeah, let's on to the Democrats really quick and their pushback or lack thereof. Well, I guess just biggest picture, what do you think? What do you think they should do about it? What would you do?
What would I do?
Yeah, what would you do?
This is what our leader didn't wind up.
Hakeem Jeffries calls you and says, I need the advice of the editor of The Economist to tell me what we should do.
I'd refer him to the editor of The Economist.
I'm sorry. You know what I fucking mean. The Lexington columnist for The Economist.
Look, I don't think what would I do? I mean, there's a series of battles that they're facing. And the next big one, I think, is the shutdown fight, right?
Yeah.
That's upon them. And honestly, this stuff's hard. I don't really know how to advise them in that. My own view is nobody should go into a shutdown fight without knowing what the end game is.
Right.
My big concern, for the Democrats going into shutdown here is that they would do it to resist, to try to draw a line in the sand and say, we're not going to be morally implicated in this budget. And then they're going to wind up caving. And we've seen this movie many times before. Newt Gingrich shutting the Congress down back in the day was really the beginning of Bill Clinton's turnaround going into the 96 election, although also sowed the seeds of his own subsequent big campaign, as you may recall, because Monica Lewinsky delivered a pizza to him in the Oval Office during the shutdown. So it was eventually figured in the Starr Report. So anyway, long way of saying I'm ducking your question.
Okay. How about let's all right, that's fine. Let's ask it this way.
I think they need to be a big party again. They need to find a way to have an umbrella. And Donald Trump has done this for the Republicans, by the way. An umbrella that's broad enough to encompass, Mamdani in New York, not to be terrified of him all the time, and also Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, and explain why these people are both Democrats and why it makes sense that they are. And I'm not hearing that from the party. I'm just hearing a lot of panic.
Yeah, I think they got to be even broader than that. I don't know. Yeah. I think Abigail Spanberger and Zoran probably agree on a lot of cultural issues. I think they got to expand out on the cultural issues side of things. Let me just ask about, I know your brother, we should say your brother is running for governor of my home state, Colorado, has left the Senate. I know that you have conflicts there as a journalist. I want to talk about that race in particular, but he's not the only one that has decided, fuck it, I don't want to be in Congress, right? Like a lot of prominent Democrats and establishment, almost all of the establishment, like my style, old school Republican types, have self-deported from DC, and a lot of people very early in their term. Michael's been there for a while, but he's not exactly an old man. The rules are different for politicians than podcasters. Anthony Gonzalez, you go down the line, Mike Gallagher. I'm no fan of that congressman from Wisconsin particularly, but he's was 38 or something when he decided, I want to leave Congress. I can't do it anymore. What do you make of that? Like the types of people, both from within the Republican Party and from the Democratic Party, that maybe could be the tip of the spear fighting him in DC have decided DC's so broken that I'm either going to become a lobbyist or run for state office or do something else.
Yeah. Last thing my brother would want for me to function as any kind of spokesman for him. And I stay away from his politics and the whole story of what he's up to. So this is not a commentary on what he may be thinking, but I mean, in general, you look at it and like there are two classes of people. They're the ones who are leaving and then the ones who stay way too long. Right. And I think some of the ones who are leaving don't want to be among the group that's there into their late 80s, being propped up by their aides. I mean, we all know that problem, which exists in both parties. It's a terrible commentary on how broken Congress is. People who want to be effective, grope our way back to a more constructive politics, are just kind of saying Congress isn't the place where that happens, or can happen. Yeah, we're seeing a number go run for governor right now. And we've seen people struggle to recruit some serious former governors to run for Senate. And the same thing. Like
Maine, you're seeing this?
Yep. In Maine, you're seeing it. We saw it in Kentucky too, right? Like they look at the Senate and say, that's not for me. It's a dismal reality, I think, of what life in Congress looks like right now.
I want to go to the Middle East with your kind of background, having covered that from Jerusalem. We have news this morning. Israel assassinated Hamas leader Khalil al-Hayya in Doha, in Qatar, inside of Qatar. Today, Israel has reportedly attacked Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Syria, and this Hamas leader inside of Qatar. So has attacks in 4 countries. Probably a remarkable kind of offensive that this is still going on. And there's so many different layers to this, but I kind of just want to let you kind of cook.
Yeah, I mean, the Doha thing is astonishing. I just saw the news of that breaking when we started talking, so I don't know. I don't know the details of that.
We do know that the U.S. got the heads up. I think is the only other thing.
We do know that now because that was one of my big questions. So we knew it.
Well, I guess we don't. I guess let me just say, a reporter in Israel was reporting that the U.S. has a heads up. I've not heard it from the U.S. government or Israel government.
Tim, we're living in it's an age of impunity, right? Where the powerful do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. After Donald Trump took the action he took against the suspected drug smugglers the other day, this is the way the powerful act. And Bibi Netanyahu has shown he's kind of run the table over the course of the last year in the region, and he's shown he will not be constrained to act in what he believes to be Israel's national interest. And the Israelis have, in the past, attempted or carried out attacks across borders in Jordan and elsewhere. Usually they try to hide their fingerprints, and what again is, to my mind, very different. It's like this is all happening out in the open to not just accomplish the immediate end, but to send a message. It's a profound change. And we'll see what the reaction is going to be in the Arab world. Is there going to be an uproar about this or not? I would not be surprised if there isn't. Again, as we haven't seen in response to, Israeli action in Lebanon and Syria and so forth.
What do you think about like the medium-term politics for Israel? And I obviously, I guess my view on this, just cards on the table, is I think that initially following October 7th, they had such grave security threats, from both Hamas and from Hezbollah on both borders and from Iran and their proxies. And there's a lot that they needed to do to protect themselves and to protect people of Israel, which is something that I'm extremely sympathetic to. As it has trudged on, now or, coming up on 2 years, it does feel like particularly the campaign in Gaza and the humanitarian crisis there is leading to a global backlash. I guess your point about the region, maybe less than we might have expected, but globally isolating Israel to a degree. Obviously, when you're reporting there, all that stuff that they care, that matters, right? I know it matters from a human rights standpoint, but also matters from them for Israel's stability, right? They need security from their neighbors, but they also need global friends and allies, right? Since they're at some level kind of on an island. And that seems to be at deep risk right now. How do you think that they're considering all that? Because based on actions today, I don't know that they seem to care.
Yeah, I don't think that they do. I think they're going to work. The view is they'll work that out over the long haul in the medium, in the short to medium term. Again, pursue their interests as they see it and security as Bibi Netanyahu sees it. I think you're right, though, Tim. Like, it's been a catastrophe for Israel's standing, I think, in the world and in its standing within America. This is again another area of rare bipartisan kind of emerging consensus, where you're seeing the Democratic Party, to a degree it hasn't been in my lifetime anyway, increasingly turning against this Israeli government and in pockets of the party against Israel itself. Obviously, it goes beyond saying the problem is Bibi Netanyahu's government, increasingly to attacking the fundamental, goals of Zionism. Zoran Mamdani himself has identified himself as an anti-Zionist. And in the Republican Party, we're seeing the same thing now, right? Like the National Conservative Convention last week.
Yeah.
It's really remarkable. I think that, Bibi sees that he feels like he'll have the evangelicals, he'll have Donald Trump in his corner. And I think that that's true. Over the longer haul, the direction of travel, though, for the state of Israel, I think, you should be concerning to any supporter of Israel.
In some quarters, still, and even more not that long ago, people would say, well, the emerging bipartisan consensus, whatever, against Israel is simply anti-Semitism, and it's just horseshoe politics, and it's far right and far left. They've always been anti-Semitic, and now they are just looking for an excuse to act on that bias, that bigotry. I think that, of course, there'd be a lot of folks in the Democratic Party in particular that would say that's not true. This is like a reaction to the policy choices that Israel's making. What do you think about all that?
Well, I think some of it is anti-Semitism. I think that's an enduring and real problem. But not all of it is anti-Semitism by any stretch. And a lot of it now is revulsion, against the civilian death toll in Gaza. And that makes a lot of Americans deeply uncomfortable and or outraged. Again, these things are really hard to disentangle. I don't think anti-Semitism has been bound up for a long time in my view, and a lot of the anti-Israel politics in the U.S. has been true on the right for a long time, and it's also been true on the left. I don't gainsay that. Like, that's a real problem. But I think Bibi Netanyahu makes a mistake when if he does, and I think he does, tell himself that that's the whole problem.
Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't. It seems to me it's like it's more likely than not that assuming we get past our authoritarian project and it's not like Baron Trump ascending to the throne, that the next, if the next president of the United States is a mainstream Democrat or J.D. Vance, I feel like Israel's, like the idea that Israel is going to get military assistance from the United States is in deep doubt, I would think, in a following administration. Don't you? If nothing changes. Do you agree with that?
If we continue on this path, I think that's right. I think, look, J.D. Vance, as on so many subjects, is going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, who the hell knows? This is true. He might change his name by then. He might become Jewish. He changes his faith.
Well. Yeah. I think it would be the fourth faith if you count his atheist period.
Yeah.
We're all free to grow and evolve. Change.
We are. I've made some changes as well. Just the one name for me so far. This takes us into the media stuff, but kind of related to the media stuff. I guess you get criticism on both sides. Like, there's some media criticism coming from old pro-Israel neocon circles that the media has been fully anti-Israel up to the point of being anti-Semitic. There's a big story in the Free Press about how the pictures of the kids suffering from famine actually had other issues, including one of them was bombed, I think, and also was hungry. Critique then from, I think, the pro-Palestine left, that the corporate media has been kind of too kind to Israel and too credulous to Israel. How do you navigate all that? Like, what do you make of those various complaints?
Like, my experience there is that people are working really hard to get the story out. I don't think we are seeing those images. We are hearing those stories. So it's not like reporters aren't trying to tell the truth about what's happening in the conflict, as we saw the images, and we are hearing about the plight of the hostages. We are hearing. I actually happen to be a believer in both sidesism or all sidesism. I think we need to hear all this stuff, and we are hearing it because there are journalists who are taking real risks. Some of them are Palestinians, some of them are Israeli. A lot of them are foreign journalists too, to get those stories out. So part of me is a little impatient with the armchair kind of bashing of journalists who are taking risks on the ground to do really hard work in real time. Like, it's hard. People make mistakes and they need to own those mistakes very quickly when they do. Again, and this is where I just sound so friggin' wishy-washy. I'm sorry, but I kind of am. The truth is that also the criticism's fair. Like, a lot of the criticism is fair. There is biased journalism that's done. There is some bad reporting done. I mean, I don't.
But you don't think there's across the mainstream media some sort of anti-Israel conspiracy, some conspiracy to make the war look worse than it is?
No. I don't. I mean, my experience of journalists generally is we're not smart enough or organized enough to conspire in the first place. Now, I'm not on the ground there.
Sure.
So I'm talking out of my hat a little bit. And in the media, we're having our own existential struggle, and the resources people can devote to those stories are not what they once were. So that's a problem too. I do think there are people that are doing their damnedest to tell the story. And I also know that they'll make mistakes. I think the test is whether they own up to those, when they do. Do you think there's a conspiracy, Tim? Do you suspect that? When you watch this stuff, do you look at it and think that this is an ideological struggle, and journalism has simply become another ideological?
No, I mean, look, people have biases. Like, I don't know, you said you kind of ascribe to all sidesism. I never really prescribed to objectivity. As like, there just is no real such thing, right? Like, I guess there's wire reporting, which is needed and important of a just this happened. And sometimes that can be biased, right? We've seen certainly bias in wire, but I think you can achieve a wire reporting kind of neutral that's like, this happened. But like, when you come to decisions about what's on the front page, decisions on what pictures to use, decisions on how to frame it, like all of that, like, people come with their own experience. And I think that there are certainly some particularly younger reporters who have been extremely radicalized against Israel, and maybe for some good reasons, by the way, who have been maybe too credulous at times in taking Hamas at its, whatever it's called, the Palestinian Health Authority, at its word when they're putting out death reports. And so, sure, like, at times maybe have been too credulous. I also think that, like, it's very obvious that there are some corporate media companies that are trying to not touch it, that like don't want to criticize Israel because they're worried about backlash among, again, I don't think it's a big conspiracy, like there's some Jewish CEO telling them they can't talk about it, but they just don't want to deal with it, right? Because they have, Jewish friends, Zionist friends in Israel. I think that you see both of those things happening. I think the idea, though, that like there's not a famine happening in Gaza is kind of crazy. And, so I think that a lot of times I think some of the media criticism is overblown to a degree of eye rolling for me. I don't know. That's what I think.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. Maybe on the objectivity point, look, I agree that like it's impossible for us as humans. The whole point of objectivity is not to achieve some sort of nirvana where you're a perfectly neutral player. The whole point is the struggle. Right. I think for this particular type of journalism, for the journalism that aspires to give people the best representation of reality possible. And, for me as a reporter in the Middle East, like often, when I got dumped into an assignment, objectivity matters, humility really matters.
Right.
It's a lesson in humility. You don't know, and it's trying to get to the scene, trying to tell the story as vividly as possible, trying to get to the bottom of who actually pulled the trigger, who detonated the bomb. But ultimately, you can't answer some of those questions, and all you can do is lay out what happened. And one of the problems we're having now in Gaza, and this is understandable, but part of the trap is it's hard to get people onto the ground there and conditions where they're really able to observe what's going on. in the Second Intifada, when I was based there, you were still able to move back and forth. It was hard and sometimes a bit risky, but you were still able to get places. And now it's much harder to do that, obviously. And when journalists are going into Gaza, they're and I'm talking about foreign journalists, they're embedded. And it's a tougher story to tell for that reason.
All right, we have some other media water cooler stuff I want to get your take on. The what have you thought about the ABC and CBS settlements? You talked earlier about the Wall Street Journal had I guess Trump is suing them over the reporting of the birthday letter to Jeffrey Epstein. It's pretty clear that he did the birthday letter to Jeffrey Epstein, but I don't know. It was also, I didn't really think that George Stephanopoulos or 60 Minutes did anything wrong either, and they settled anyway. So what did you make of those choices?
Like, I'm not having been on the receiving end of this kind of suit myself. I think it's a terrible, miserable process. It's concerning to any journalist, I think, to see a media organization settle rather than fight. I think the test for all these organizations going forward is it going to compromise their journalism? Is the settlement? That's what really matters to me in the end. Is what does it mean going forward? And happy the possible outcome of this is that they recommit themselves to getting the story right. I don't know.
What does that word mean, though? Recommit? Did they not get the story right the first time? And the 60 Minutes lawsuit was so preposterous. It's a fucking show's called 60 Minutes.
That's fair.
They edit it down to 60 so that it can fit within 60 minutes with 4 commercial breaks. That's the show. So if you interview somebody for longer than an hour, then they're going to cut the interview up. The thing is ridiculous. And then since then, CBS has now said that on the Sunday show, they're only going to do live or live to tape because the administration complained about the way it was cutting. What? Yeah. What are we talking about here? This is folding. This is not a legitimate attack on the criticism of CBS, was it?
I didn't recommit. I didn't want to suggest remotely that meant they weren't committed to it before. I just mean every morning you get up and recommit yourself.
Right, got it.
If you're in one of these jobs. So I didn't.
CBS also did this thing today.
Is the live to tape thing that bad? Given the world that we're living in today, where there is so much.
Sure, no, it's not that bad if you decide you want to do it because you're a news organization. You think that's best. It's pretty bad if it's the government tells you they're not going to give you interviews anymore unless you do it a certain way and you say, okay.
Yeah. I guess the question of why they did it really does matter in that sense. The outcome, I guess, I don't think is necessarily a disaster. I mean, it's nice to see the full interview. It's nice.
Sure, I hear you. I just think we have some data points about the folding that I'm worried about. As part of the Skydance's commitments to the Trump administration, when they got approval with their merger to Paramount, they said they'd do an ombudsman who'd look into anti-conservative bias or whatever. They've hired Ken Weinstein. He was a donor to the Trump Victory Fund. He was previously nominated to be ambassador to Japan for Trump. He's at the Hudson Institute. Has never worked at a journalism outlet before. What do you think about having him as the ombudsman?
I don't know the whole story there. I mean, he was also in Obama. I was just reading a bio of him yesterday. I don't.
And he's a donor to the Trump Victory Fund. So and he wasn't a journalist. It's a pretty strange choice for ombudsman, don't you think?
It's not clear to me what the ombudsman's role is going to be there and what their authority is. Do you know, is he going to make public reports? Is he going to have authority over the journalism to change it if he doesn't like it? There's a lot I just don't know about what it said. I think he's reporting directly to the corporate leadership.
Correct.
Obviously, having an ombudsman is not a bad thing. Lots of journalism organizations have had them traditionally. They've had various degrees of effectiveness. I just don't know how this is supposed to
I guess, sure. I guess we could get into the minutiae of all these things, but this doesn't worry you? It seems like these media institutions are doing things to appease the leader, right? They're whether, who knows how it will affect their journalism. We will watch that. But media companies saying, okay, in order for us to be able to get a merger, or in order for us not to get hassled or sued, we're going to hire certain people that you like or you approve of.
It is concerning that it's being done for those reasons. How it actually works in practice, it's like the changes at Columbia University. Are those going to be in the end like detrimental to the education of the students or not? I don't think we know the answer to that question yet. I don't like, particularly when it comes to media organizations, it makes me, really concerned when they're, changing their practices under government pressure.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I don't know how they're going to, I think the minutia matters here, Tim. Like, what is this job actually going to be? What's the effect on the journalism actually going to be? But you're right. Like, should we be on guard about it? Like, and worried? Sure. Yeah. Well, it's hard to answer this question without, again, I'm not 60 Minutes is awesome. I'm not like, this is quite apart from anything that's about that particular case. Like, yeah, they can't tell us what to do. They shouldn't be able to tell us what to do. You can't let the government boss journalism organizations around. I totally agree with all that. I totally would resolve that. The notion that we should just keep carrying on as we're carrying on because we're so awesome, I think deserves continual scrutiny.
Let's do the scrutiny.
And that's where I'm being a little, maybe I'm just being contrarian for contrarian's sake.
No, I want the scrutiny. Yeah. This is what I want to actually talk about with our remaining time, because I don't think it's perfect either. I think that it's a lot harder than people realize about where to go with this. And I think there are different views. I'm interested in your view. Just for the backstory, if people don't know, like you had gotten embroiled in that controversy where you were editor of the New York Times opinion page when the Tom Cotton op-ed was approved, and all the woke staffers got mad. And so you're kind of a little bit of, I don't know, canary in the coal mine or something around these sort of questions, right? At the time. So there were like concerns. Roadkill? Is that what you call yourself? Roadkill? Okay. You're roadkill over these sort of left, whatever word you want to use, lefty, woke, progressive, like outrage, the revolt of the young woke staffers, whatever you want to call it. And you wrote an Atlantic piece about it a couple of years ago. And like there was, I think, a real legitimate complaint that I agree with, which was there is this kind of progressive intolerance at times inside media organizations where, if somebody gave a wrong think, then there would be a mob that would come for them. And sometimes they'd be pushed out. Sometimes they'd just have to go quiet for a while. And occasionally those mobs had legitimate complaints. Sometimes they were borderline. Sometimes they were illegitimate. And that was like no way to run a news organization. And I agree with that. And so the thing is, though, I worry that we're overshooting the other direction, like that there is this idea that now, okay, the reaction to that needs to be, we got to make sure we have token pro-Trump voices around. And we got to make sure that we have MAGA opinions here to ensure that we're fair. And I think that's very hard in this administration because Trump puts his advocates in a position constantly where they have to lie to advance his point of view. And so I'm curious what your thought is on how you kind of achieve a balance as a news organization where you're not being owned by whatever the most extreme ideological views of the staff, but also you're not just becoming like, okay, we'll provide a token point of view for something we know is false because we feel like we need to be fair. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Look, I don't think you should ever publish anything is false. Like, I don't know why you would ever do that.
Or someone else making an argument that they don't believe. How about that? Well, somebody's making an argument they know they don't really believe, or an argument that's BS, or an argument.
Well, as an editor, I would never want to publish something like that. I mean, the Tom Cotton piece, it wasn't a false piece. It wasn't something he didn't believe.
Right.
And to my mind, it was a totally legitimate point of view that deserved to be represented in the debate at that time, when we were also publishing pieces advocating the abolition of the police. He was advocating that at that time that troops should be used in places where police were overwhelmed by looting and rioting. And I thought it was bad journalism. It would be bad journalism not to have that argument in front of the readers.
I agree with that, for what it's worth.
And I think, by the way, it was also bad politics. It wasn't my job to make the determination based on the politics, but it was dumb politics too. I mean, you try to cut people out of the debate like that, and you wind up where we are today. I think illiberalism on the left and illiberalism on the right results in this pendulum swinging back and forth the way you described. So what do you do about that? These are, again, Tim, it's a so unsatisfying answer. It's a question of the minutiae again, because it's hard to draw lines and say, people occupy different lanes, right? You've got your journalists who are supposed to be at places like the Wall Street Journal or the Times or ABC, who are supposed to be struggling towards objectivity and telling you what the facts are. They need to check their bias to the extent they can, and all the rest of it. And the opinion editors, I think, at those sorts of places need to be, curating a really wide-ranging debate. But that doesn't mean publishing stuff is bullshit. Like, you don't do that. You don't publish stuff that's
okay, sure. I was going to give you a stark example. Let me try to put it a different way. I'll give my view after. But do you think that, like, broadly speaking, the mainstream media during the last 10 years has been unfair in Trump's favor or unfair in his disfavor? Like, do you think that they've been biased towards him or against him, broadly speaking?
I don't think we have a mainstream media anymore. So first,
but the big outlets, CBS, ABC, NBC, Washington Post, New York Times, whatever, the main media outlets. Do you think that they've been unfair to Trump in ways that have benefited him or unfair to him in ways that have harmed him?
I think by and large, they've covered him in ways that have benefited him in the end. And some of those ways have been a function of bias against him.
Okay.
I think the deeper problem has been that they just and you heard this from the editor-in-chief of the New York Times, said in 2020, the Times still didn't understand why Trump won in 2016. It was a failure to get out in the country and understand what the hell was going on. To do journalism was the problem, I think. Is that a function of bias? Partly, yeah, it is. It's partly a function of coastal elitism and Ivy Leagueism and all those other issues that God knows I'm myself an exemplar of those qualities. So again, I'm falling into the trap of sounding righteous too. And it's just, you're reminding yourself of that. It is like cultivating an attitude of humility about this stuff.
Yeah.
And recognizing that the Trump phenomenon was real. It took a long time for that to seep in, I think, even up through the last presidential election. But maybe I'm not answering the question.
No, you're answering it in a way. That's good, because I agree with that. They certainly were in a bubble, and out of touch with what a lot of Trump voters said and thought. I also just think, though, that the way, going back to our original topic about how Trump's, what did you say, how he has, other candidates haven't had the imagination that he has, the way in which he breaks the system, right? The way in which he does things that no other politician does makes him very challenging to cover. And just the example I always just fall back on, because I just think it's an easy, I know, I love my counterfactuals. I think it's an easy game. If you put the Mitt Romney 47% tape into the middle of a Donald Trump speech today, it doesn't even make the paper. It doesn't even make the paper. Yeah. It doesn't. He says so much crazy shit all the time. And yesterday he did an aside about how crime rates are wrong because we count all these domestic violence things as crimes, and they're not really crime. It's just kind of it's like a husband and a wife get in a fight, and that's not really a crime. If any other politician had said that, that is a front page news catastrophic gaffe that is career ending. And so you have this cadre of people out there, mostly on the right, who are professional media critics, who are they're so unfair to Mr. Trump. And you got this one thing not quite right. And you're so, you're always so negative about him. But on the other hand, it's he gets graded on such a curve that, in my view, is a fair rendering of him all day, every day would just be news coverage of all the illegal and inappropriate shit that he did. But you can't do that as a media outlet, right? You got to edit. And so he benefits from just these media constructs of, you only have so much space in the paper, and that's old news. And well, do people care about this, right? And so I don't know how you deal with that, right? Like, I don't know how, I think that like putting in some like pro-Trump flunkies in your media outlet to like look over the shoulder of the editors, I don't see how that does anything that deals with our actual problem. And so I don't know what you think. Like, if you were back in charge of a media outlet, like, how would you navigate? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, look, I'm going to give you an answer that's going to make you very impatient with me, probably. But I feel like you're talking about two slightly different problems. There's the journalistic problem and there's the political problem. And if I were the editor of a news organization, the political problem would not be my problem. Like, now, it is for a publication like the Bulwark. It is that those two things are not separable, I don't think. Maybe you disagree with me on this. You guys have, and that's fine. I think the world...
I disagree with it. I disagree with it that it's separable in the other outlet. Because if you were in the news outlet, if tomorrow Jeff Bezos called you and said, James, I'm putting you in charge of the paper. You get to decide what's on the front page every day. You're the executive editor. And then you decided, then using your own news judgment over the next 30 days to write a story about the latest insane thing Donald Trump did and made it a banner headline on the front page of the newspaper every day for 30 straight days. Jeff Bezos would call you in and say, you're creating a political problem for me. And I don't know that you would have necessarily been not doing your news duty. He's the president and he does crazy things all the time. And so I think that I don't think it's separable in this environment with Donald Trump. I don't think it's separable now at a news outlet.
Yeah, Tim, but I refer you to our either earlier conversation about principles. Like, at that point, I would quit. Like, and the problem we have is not enough people are willing to quit. And yeah, maybe they'll all wind up quitting. And at that point, won't have news organizations left. We won't have politicians in office left. But what we need is people who are willing to say, fuck it. Like, no, this matters to me. And I'm reporting the story accurately and fairly. And it's your right. And again, we're in hypothetical land. Like, it's your right, my corporate overlord, Jeff Bezos, whoever it is, it's your paper. You can fire me, or I've been fired, for Christ's sake, for exactly this. Right. Like, that's what I mean. And again, there's nothing glorious about that. I'm not bragging about being publicly humiliated and chased out of the New York Times. But I
don't think you were humiliated.
Well,
I don't think it was.
Maybe
that might be a question for your therapist.
Talked enough about that.
I know your question for your therapist, but on this, from my perspective, it was not anything to be humiliated.
But you see what I'm saying? Like, then you quit. Like But what I'm saying about making a distinction between the journalism and the politics, there's still a deep journalistic problem there that you're talking about, which is like it's this guy. This is where I say he's hacked our system. He understands the media environment much better, certainly, than I ever have. And in that leader we were talking about earlier in The Economist, my colleague John made a great comparison between Donald Trump and the TikTok algorithm. Like, he gets your attention, he does something outrageous, and before you've even processed it, he's doing the next thing, and you can't look away. And our politics can't process it. Our journalism can barely process it. All we can do is keep, reporting this stuff. It's the politics part of it that has to figure this out and grapple with it. And that's why we need a meaningful opposition in this country. I don't think we can look to journalism. The type of journalistic operations you're describing, just they aren't the leadership of the resistance. It's not their role, in my opinion.
Hey everybody, we are going on the road this fall and I want to see you. Sadly, our Toronto tickets have already sold out, so I'm plotting a return to Canada. You guys just wait on that. But come together with me, Sarah, and JVL for 2 nights of camaraderie and joy and resistance and podcasting and maybe some special guests at the DC event. We might give a big middle finger to the masked agents of Donald Trump that are roaming the city's free streets. And we'll be back in New York a couple times later. The first time we've been in New York in ages. The last time we had a live New York event, I can remember because it was during the Nuggets title run. And me and a handful of folks who came out went and watched Jamal Murray put up 40, I think, on the Lakers after the podcast. It was quite enjoyable. Maybe we'll have a similar night. We'll see. And if you really want more time with us, and you don't want to just place a bet that you'll end up at the same bar with me after, because you never know, you could pay for VIP tickets. They're included in the sale. It'll give you earlier entry into the show, and you can hang with us for an intimate Q&A. You can check out all the details and get tickets at thebulwark.com/events. For more, that's thebulwark.com/events. See you all on the East Coast. I guess my question, though, is, to me, I think that, so you said there were two things. I think maybe I'm talking about two things as well. Like, there is, like, sure, most journalists did not vote for Donald Trump. Most people with college educations didn't vote for Donald Trump. It's kind of hard. Like, we're in an education polarized time, so it would be kind of challenging to find, and you could do it, but like to get a New Yorker magazine that is balanced 50-50 in a country where 90% of the people that graduated with the journalism degrees voted against Trump. That's a broader cultural problem I don't know how to fix, right? Like, but so sure, of course, there is bias in institutions against Donald Trump. I would argue mostly deserved. But like, there are also like journalistic conventions that are biased in his favor, right? And to me, like, those end up having more of an impact on the public narrative and the public debate than like the individual reporters' biases. If you asked, I don't know, whatever, like somebody at the Free Press or the Fox Media of Howard Kurtz, like they would say the opposite, right? They would say that that's a crazy assertion, that like Donald Trump, like everybody in these institutions has deep Trump derangement syndrome, and like that's the main problem. Like, what do you, like, you've been in the institutions, like, do you think that journalists are like clinically biased against Donald Trump, and that is like the issue that we need to deal with? Or like, do you think that the issue is more that like Donald Trump has broken the way the journalism works?
I think the problem is more the latter than the former, and it's not just that Donald Trump has broken it; it's just the digital economy has broken it. We've been living in a period of existential crisis for American media and journalism now for 25 years, really intensifying over the course of the last 10 or 15. So, and I do think it's, that those institutions were vulnerable again to somebody who had a little more imagination about how you could tip them over than we realize. Partly, there are some journalistic conventions that are hackable. Like, both sidesism is hackable, right? If you're going to you're going to do that. Now, I think good journalists give both sides. They give people a fair hearing, and they're still able to render kind of, the truth, or the closest we can get to that. But
it's like a sports team. Sports teams can hack refs, right? It's like, if I foul every play, eventually they're going to not call it because they're not wired to call a foul every play on me.
Yeah.
Like, it's always,
and you can work the ref too. You can call them and scream at them. And there's a lot of stuff that Donald Trump does that other politicians have done forever. He's more aggressive at it. Some ways he's better at it. I do think a lot of it is just the way the attention economy has changed. And in this sense, in our politics, I don't think there's any going back, from the idea that the president, this is one of the great failures, I think, of Joe Biden, was obviously the failure to be able to communicate at all.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump is at the other extreme of that. Now, communication at all, that they call it the most transparent administration in history. It's not, communication is not the same as transparency, much less accountability, I think, is what we're discovering. But man, his ability to just dominate people's attention is something that, we as journalists, like, it's really hard to filter out the signal from the noise, I think.
I totally agree on the communication side, and it's something that Democrats need to be awake to next time, because it's not going back. It's not going back. You have to be able to communicate in different ways than the old days. Unfortunately, it's like part of the job. It's kind of like why I got frustrated when people said, like, well, Biden was doing the job. What they always meant was like behind the scenes. And like, and I was like, I'm sorry, but actually talking is part of the job of president now. Like, and maybe it wasn't in 1882, but it like sure as hell is in 2025. Right. And that is just, I do think, a reality. And
it has been for a long time, by the way. Like,
it's especially true now, but it has been for a long time.
It's especially true now. And not to be able to do that, I was reading, there was something about the Afghanistan withdrawal. There was a news story the other day, and the disaster of the withdrawal. And there was just a line in there after several days when Joe Biden broke his silence about the withdrawal and X. And I'm just like, right. That's just the notion that you thought you could live in a world where you weren't, daily, constantly communicating with people. I think we still underrate kind of that dimension of the Biden kind of White House and the hole that it put the Democrats in.
All right. We've gone long, but I know you're doing your best to be meticulous, which I appreciate. You told me I'd get impatient with you. I'm not impatient's not the right word. I enjoy chatting with you. One last time, circling back to the point. I think you kind of have become an avatar for people who say that the media is deeply biased to the left, whether you want it to be or not, because of what happened to you. Like, it was just the other day that I was trying to downplay something on social media, and I was like, this is not as bad as people say. And I had people replying to me, ask James Bennet if it's as bad as you say. I'm like, oh, I have him on the podcast next week, so I will. I think people would be surprised to hear you say that, like, you don't share the view of, like, the right-wing media critics, that, like, the big problem with the institutional media outlets is that there's a bias against Trump and against conservatives.
I think there is a real problem in some of these mainstream so-called media organizations of illiberalism, which is fundamentally anti-journalistic. It's not necessarily bias against, it manifests partly as bias against Donald Trump, absolutely, and bias against the right. I do think that is a problem. I don't think that fight's lost, is I guess what I'm saying. And what I think has gone wrong is the same problem, again, is editors who know better, who don't have the guts to push back. Now, I don't think that's totally shaped coverage. I think it is one of the problems. I just think also the bubble problem, which is related to that but slightly different, is a big part of it. I'm not, Tim, what should I'm not giving you the answer you're after here. I do think it's a huge problem. I guess I don't think it's the whole problem. And I think it speaks as much to cultural blinders as it does to political bias.
You are kind of giving me the answer. I guess I'm asking. I'm asking in the context of, I'm not trying to be sad about it. Like CBS is really trying to reshape all this. They're saying, oh, they might buy the free press. We don't know. They're hiring this ombudsman who's a Trump donor. They're like, we think that there's been this problem, and CBS seems to have identified that the problem was like that there was bias against conservatives in the coverage. I don't really. I mean, I think that sure, at times there's been some bias against conservatives, but I don't think that's the biggest problem at all of the news media. I think the bigger problem is that they have been unable to deal with the ways in which Trump has hacked the system and worked the refs, right? And so, to the extent that you might want to get back out there, like if you were starting a newsroom, like, do you see those both as, like, I guess that's what I'm just trying to kind of tease out. Like, do you think that it's true that, like, bringing in some more right-wing people into these organizations is the answer, or do you think there's a different answer?
I think more diverse newsrooms is part of the answer, and a diversity in all senses of the term, like people from different walks of life and all the rest of it. I do think that's part of the answer, because it is one way you kind of get your unconscious biases challenged and all the rest of it. So I do think that has value in a certain kind of newsroom. Sure. My concern is partly that this is part of the mess that we're in. This illiberalism in the press did contribute to the collapse of trust. I think it really did, and helped us dig the hole that a lot of these institutions find themselves in. Do I think that tilting to the right is the answer? No, of course not. Like, ideological bias in a different direction isn't going to solve the problem. And I also don't think a sort of stupid push me, pull you dialectic is the answer. I think we have all sorts of new ways of doing journalism today, including like the conversation you are having right now. Although in some ways this is an old way. It's like back to the old days too.
Fireside.
Yeah, but I think the old values matter. Like, I think you have to find ways to instill kind of these basic principles, which are about, like, we don't journalists generally, they're not experts at anything, right? Like, Their job is to like go out and learn and find stuff out. And if you start from the proposition, and this was the problem I had with some of my colleagues then at the Times, like they knew what the truth was, like they knew the reality, like,
Right.
and as opposed to like, Jesus, what the hell's going on in this country? I want to get out and understand it. Like it's the ethos that worries me more than the ideology.
Yeah.
And it presents as ideology.
No, I agree with that.
I'm doing a really poor job.
No, you aren't actually. You're
myself.
taking us to a nice place to end, because that's the ethos. Like this is the thing that I think is totally wrong that I'm seeing CBS do and CNN do. And they're like, we can solve this problem by having somebody come in who like will be our avatar of MAGA, and they can reflect that point of view no matter what. And I'm like, that's not journalism. You're helping him. Like that's a gift to the powerful is what it is. It's a gift to the powerful. And to the extent that there is bias in journalism, like, of course, like you should have diverse viewpoints of people that work there, of course. But like the goal is to investigate and challenge the people in power. And if your answer as a journalist institution is actually, we want to bring in a few representatives of the people in power to make sure their view is represented, like that is leading us to a bad place, especially if you're doing it under threat from the leader. And like that is the thing that worries me that I'm seeing from CBS in particular, and a little bit from Zaslav too.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's the journalists should be out talking to those people and understanding that point of view. Like that's how you get there. And that's where I think that these insular journalistic cultures disserve the readers and damage the organizations over the long haul, because they get out of step with where they're failing at the basic task of journalism, which is try to represent what the hell's going on. And that's the problem. And that's what I was trying to warn against in the piece I wrote. And so, bias is part of I'm not here saying there isn't a problem with bias. There has been. So anyway,
that's James Bennet. We're doing it this way. We're the Economist style. No, you don't have to apologize. We're going long. This is a podcast. We have unlimited time. The show isn't over. It's not 60 minutes. I don't have to edit it down. I don't have to, Donald Trump doesn't have to get mad at me because I clipped you out of context. I guess that there will be probably something on social media from this, which you can sue me if you don't like the 2.5 minutes that we choose. We'll see how it goes. I appreciate the time. Good luck over there at The Economist with your spelling. I hope to talk to you again soon.
Great to see you, Tim. Thanks,
man. Everybody else will be back here tomorrow for another edition of the podcast. See you all then. Peace.